What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Be Better podcast, episode 36. Please say welcome back to our special guest, Brad, for coming back again for the second time. I know we covered this back the original meeting where he was going to actually do a live demonstration of rock tape and a little bit more about that and how it helps. So, guys, let's jump into it. Matt, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks again for coming back and giving us this. Don't need to be giving us more information on this rock tape presentation and theory. By all means, let's talk about the theory.
Yeah, you know what? The biggest piece, guys, I think with taping, there's a lot of myths around it. So I've been with Rock Tape, and it's been great. I'm with a great company. Everything that we do as a company is really built around the concept of movement. So I love what we do because our philosophy is driven by that. So taping is really a movement strategy. And that's what I want to kind of get across tonight because I think it's important. I always tell people one of my jobs with Rock Tape is kind of to demystify the effects of taping. The assumption is always this, right? People think that you're putting tape on and you're holding a joint in place. You're pulling a joint into a position. It's an impossibility. So I have a practice here in Canada, and my practice is very broad-based. I have a very broad scope of practice. I'm an RMT here, and massage therapy in Canada is a pretty invasive kind of education. And I'm more on the osteopathic side. So I work with a lot of osteos, and I've trained with osteos for the last 4 years. But Matt, you know this, I was with Charles and I came out of the strength and conditioning world, and it just organically, I kind of moved into more of the therapeutic side because that really was what was happening. So myself, Clark Flynn, all these guys, we ended up as RMTs and we're all working together as a team in Canada. But I have a pretty broad toolbox, and I use acupuncture in my practice and dry needling and all that stuff. Great stuff. But I'm going to tell you the go-to for me, and most of my patients know this, is tape application. So when we talk about indications for tape, one of the primary indications is pain. And if someone has pain, it's a hard thing for people to wrap their head around because they think, how does putting a piece of tape on affect pain outcomes? Well, I'll talk about that in just a bit. The other thing is that there's a really clear indication that when I apply tape and I give the nervous system a bit more information, I can really change motor control to some degree. So I have a lot of athletes, and again, I have a practice where I have high performance athletes. I have professional hockey players and rugby players, football players, but then I have patients, geriatric patients. My mother-in-law is 89, and I tape her all the time. So that's the other piece of the puzzle I think that's incredibly important to understand is this is not in its purest delivery a performance-based application. And initially, tape was in kind of the CrossFit world. We were very much involved and still are in CrossFit. And so the idea was that people really viewed it as this athletic application. I'm going to tell you that all the clinical studies tell us that that's probably not the sweet spot. Yeah, it's great, but I tape geriatric patients. I tape pediatric patients. I had a lot of hockey players this week who were doing summer hockey here in Canada. Obviously, it's a crazy thing. And I taped a bunch of like 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. And we're just using tape to prime motor control and improve some of the pain management around a joint complex if we see that. So those are the indications, right? The indications are, do we have a pain issue? Is there a change in that fascial density? And this isn't, by no means are we going to go into too much on fascia, but I have to tell you that this is really important because the fascial piece is really, really a significant part of that delivery. Mm-hmm. The fascial system is this wonderfully dense layer of tissues and layers of tissue, and they shouldn't be dense, but the fact is they glide and slide over each other. So in a healthy human being, you have a fascial system where you have a superficial layer and deep fascial layer. And it doesn't sound like anything too significant, right? And in fact, I'm going to be 60. So when I was in university, I had a professor, we had an anatomy lab, a cadaver lab. And the fact was that we walked into the lab and they had a cadaver with a fascial system intact. Great. Fact was, he said it doesn't do anything. It's just an envelope. It just surrounds the body. And that was in the 80s, right? So be it. That's where we were with the science. Fast forward 30 years, I think I mentioned this last time, I went to a fascial dissection course at Queen's University here in Kingston, and there were osteos there. And the osteopaths have figured this out. They are literally the fascial experts. And when we walked in, the cadavers had been prepared, leaving the fascial system intact. And when Myers talks about all these fascial chains and these really predictive loops of fascia and bands of fascia in the system, he nailed it. But here's the key piece, man. This fascial system is the most sensory dense tissue in the human body. Muscle is dumb. Muscle is hardware. It produces force. That's it. The idea that the GPS or the motor control, the GPS interest of this human system is governed by fascial system. It's a tensional system that's highly sensory and highly adaptive. So when we start to apply tape to human beings, what we're doing is we're applying tape and using the skin as a conduit to the brain. So let me make it simple. When that fascial system is gliding and sliding, and there's lots of those mechanoreceptors that are embedded in fascia are doing their job, we can provide input. And so the message gets to the brain gives us some output, and it's a great dynamic adaptive loop. Here's where things go wrong though. In the last fascial congress, when they talked about fascia gets dense. So it gets gluey, and it sits in this gluey matrix. And after trauma, the fascial characteristics change. Fascia becomes dense. And if it slides and glides, things are good. If it doesn't, it literally is as if you are changing the messaging to the brain. And once the brain has a faulty message, it's not going to grant you anything. You're going to change motor control. And one of the ways that the body brings your attention to a specific area of the body is by producing pain or expressing pain as an output.
Right.
So here's the crazy part, right? There's three things that tape does. The first thing that tape does is it taps into a mechanoreceptor pool. When I put tape on the skin and shear skin, and I'll show you when I do the demo, when we shear skin and pull and shear on the skin and decompress it, we're changing those fascial layers. And because they're so sensory dense, we're providing a message. This is my conduit to the brain. So that's the first thing. The second piece of the puzzle is by creating shear on those tissues and improving that glide, I'm going to change how those tissues move. Hence, I'm going to move more efficiently. But I think the important piece of this is that neurosensory component. Can I tap into the brain and change the messaging in a way that really primes function? And so we can talk about this. Pain is one of the markers that we look at when we start to tape people. And if I have someone come with a pain, it's not a catch-all. I don't use it on everybody. But, 30, 40 years ago, you guys probably, I'm sure you've experienced this white leukotape, the old tape that they used to kind of brace everything. That's a faulty model, man. That model doesn't make sense. Knowing what we know now, the model is nonsense to me. It doesn't mean there aren't times in therapeutic interventions where I have guys with knee replacements right now. The focus, even in the first 48 hours, and this has changed so dramatically, is to get them moving. The idea of using a piece of tape or white leukotape to try to limit range of motion or limit orthokinematics does not make sense now that we understand the value of movement in priming the nervous system and improving tissue function. Look, if you don't move, tissues are not going to be healthy. And it makes sense, right? As people age, what do they do less of? They move less. They age faster. They age faster. And my clients that I have in my practice who are elderly, older, the ones that do very well with regards to therapy and age well, if you ask them what's the single variable that has been kind of consistent across that population, I can tell you almost guaranteed it is movement.
It's funny. We always tell our patients the first thing after any procedures, anything that basically gets them in a episode at the hospital, the first thing we want you to do, obviously, if there's, there is some indications that we don't want to move it, but most of the time, like our heart patients out the heart surgery, we want to up and moving. Hip surgeries, up and moving, at a pain tolerance level, because like you said, if not, you're going to go backwards quick.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a quick indication, and then I'll mention something about the movement issue, and I'll talk a little bit about just a little bit more about the tape issue. But I have a patient right now with a knee replacement. First day he comes in, these 48 hours removed, 72 hours removed, and we started to guide him through ranges of motion that are very controlled. And we worked on the scar manipulation with tape, unbelievable. Because scars are a very limiting factor in mobility. So post-surgically, that's one of the misses in a lot of cases. There's a failure to address scars. Scars can become very dense and can affect motion at every level. Those fascial layers are pinned. So we worked on him nonstop, and I've been taping him and giving him a movement strategy. And he actually texted me the other day. He went to a surgeon. He's 6 weeks, and the surgeon said he's cleared at a 3-month level. He's full range of motion, 130 degrees. He's pain-free, no swelling. But we were aggressive. And one of the variables, two of the variables, I would argue, that probably made the biggest difference was a tape application that we gave him, both for the scar and the knee. And then we gave him very aggressive movement strategies that just were outside of that pain response that was limiting. And we call it the rule of 3 in my practice. I had a patient today and I said to her, when you're moving, if the pain doesn't exceed 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10, we're good. It's never going to be pain-free. But I used tape on her, and today she said, when she did all the exercises today and I had taped her shoulder, she said it was game-changing for her. So I think it's important when we talk about tape as just one of the tools in my treatment toolbox. It can be very powerful. I just taught in Calgary, and I'm going to tell you that with the massage therapy world, my job with them, and now I work for Massage Addict here in Canada, so I work as a consultant for them. My job with them is to build tape into a massage therapy toolbox. That's my job with the company. And when massage therapists see how this works, they get a pretty good idea that this can be an incredibly effective strategy that they can build into their toolbox. Because if someone leaves and they're in pain, you do nothing to mitigate that over time. The fact is, if you give them exercise, they're probably not going to do it.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me, because I still have this all the time. I have guys show up to my office and said, yeah, I got out of surgery and I just went to this guy and he just started giving me exercises. What? How? The structure, the joint itself or the tissues haven't been changed at all. You've got a situation where the joint complex and the tissues are going to be relatively resistant to movement. The tissues don't function well. The joint mechanics are poor. We do a lot of joint mobilizations and joint centrations to affect changes in the structure. But this is important. Structure feeds function. You can't just assume that you can exercise your way out of a problem. That's not true. And I say this all the time. I teach a bunch of courses here on corrective exercise, and I tell everybody, you can't strength train your way out of a motor control problem. Doing more reps and more shit is never going to drive change to the extent that you're going to get great motion. You've got to work on tissues. You've got to change the nervous system, because the only thing the nervous system knows when there's trauma, either surgical trauma or imposed trauma, is threat. And a lot of guys talk about this in great detail. Lorimer Mosley, one of the top pain researchers in the world. Perry Nicholson, who is a rock tape guy. Perry's amazing. They talk in detail about the concept of threat and how it changes what the nervous system will grant you. If the nervous system perceives there's a problem, probably not going to give you much, because in fact, that's what the brain's supposed to do. Brain's job is to predict threat and then assign whatever it's going to assign. And if there's a lot of threat around the potential of movement, it's probably not going to do much. You're not going to it's not going to grant you anything. No. So my version of the tape model is this. I think when you put tape on the skin, you are using the skin as really a pathway to a nervous system that craves better input. And once you provide that, then you just reinforce it through good therapy and tape, and then assign movement around that. If you build that model, your treatment plan or your model involves treating the nervous system and the tissues so they move more functionally with less pain, and then assign better movement strategies to reinforce that, and use tape to further reinforce the outcomes. Home run, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I love how that it's an indicator that if you're able to provide that network for the fascia, it all just works and clicks.
Yeah, so I'll give you the perfect example. I'll give you one more indication, and this is exactly when this happens. But I've treated a ton of athletes, but about 6 years ago, there was a guy locally here, and he owned a polo ground, and he said, can you come and tape our horses? And we had equine tape. Now, Matt, the crazy part of the story is I went in there and I'd never been near, like my wife said, you've never even been near a horse. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
So I had no idea. So anyways, the one guy that works for Rock Tape, our lead guy, Steve Capobianco, brilliant guy, one of the best. He had just come back from, I believe, Dubai, and he had taped the horses for the royal family. So he was in Denver and I was going in on the Monday, and these are really like $1 million horses. And I'm like, geez, I hope I know what I'm doing. But if all holds true, life's
Right.
good. I mean, you're never going to hurt anyone with tape. Here's the deal.
Right.
The only contraindication for tape, from my perspective, is if they're super sensitive to a Band-Aid, they've had some skin reaction, or for some reason there's an open wound. You would never tape on that, but take that off the table. There's not a lot of contraindications. It's safe, it's effective. So anyways, I go in and tape the horses. What I didn't know was the nervous system in a horse and the skin, the matrix of a horse, is highly responsive to input and touch, way different than a human being. I went in, and this horse they had been in pain and hadn't run at all. So it takes an entire roll of tape to do the horse.
Sure.
It's crazy. I taped the horse and I followed the same fascial lines that you would follow in a human being. No difference. And that's what Steve had told me. I taped the horse, and within literally 4 minutes, the horse's head had come up and it was trying to get out of the kind of area in the barn, getting into the area that they were going to run. And the horse trotted around, and it hadn't moved in almost a week. The reason I share that story is we have a system where the nervous system is highly responsive, significantly more responsive to input than in a human being. And if there's anything that qualifies the effect of tape, that's the model. Horses respond like that. Taping is a neurological strategy from my perspective.
Oh my God, it's groundbreaking.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's crazy cool. And you wouldn't believe it. I mean, there was another one. I'll just mention this quickly, and then we'll talk a little about the demos I'm going to do. But I had taped a young boy with cerebral palsy, and so the parents came to me and said, you're the rock tape guy. Let's give it a shot, because one of the go-tos with CP medically is Botox. To change the spasticity of the tissue. You've got a tonic nervous system and overactive nervous system, and the tissues are highly responsive or highly tonic. So we tried the tape. Amazing. I taped him in a spiral fashion. So we tape up the limb in a spiral fashion. He crawled into my office, and I taped him twice. And after the second time, he walked out of my office.
So, well, what's the spiral? I'm trying to think.
You spiral up the limb. It's pretty complex, but the point of the story is, by taping on the skin in a very three-dimensional fascia, you feed the nervous system, and that nervous system is faulty. And the crazy part of it, not only did it work, they taped him consistently, and over time they had to tape him less because he started to adapt to the tape, and he was actually moving better even without the tape. But they've done studies with tape where I'll give you one last research study, and then I'll do the demos for you. They did a research study, and they took individuals, brought them into a lab, and they put them into terminal extension at the knee. So these individuals had a limitation in terminal extension. Hamstring length was limited. So they had 3 groups. One of the groups did some static stretching, I believe. One of the groups did PNF. And then the last group did some mobility in PNF, but then they taped them. So all the groups had an increase in range of motion post-study within the first few minutes. Makes sense, right? They stretched them. They brought them back 48 hours after, and all of the 3 groups, when they came back in, the first 2, PNF and static stretching, or a modality of static stretching, all reverted to the same length. The extension had been gone, had been destroyed over time. They lost that capacity. The group with the tape had exactly the same extension function. The hamstring strength was maintained by tape. Then they took the tape off, and 72 hours later, they brought them back in, and the group that had the tape on but had had it taken off still had the same level or range of motion. The tape primed the nervous system.
Man, I'm saying, I don't know why people aren't using tape more often.
So this is the crazy part, right? Because I teach all over the place. I'm teaching for Massage Addict this Sunday, and Matt, this happens every time I teach. All the therapists like, how didn't we know about this? Because no one gave you good. It's not that you didn't know about tape. You didn't know why tape worked.
Right.
Education. And that's why rock tape, I believe, has been so successful. We built an educational model around all the things we're talking about. Why does tape work? What happens when you apply tape? And how does it affect treatment outcomes? If you understand that, it's an easy fit. But most people assume that when you're taping the old school model with white tape, you're holding something in place. You're restricting motion. Again, you're not. You should never do that. And in fact, with kinesiology tape, because of the nature of the tape, that's not what's happening. It's simply not the case. So sorry, we got into this real quick, and I mean, all I can tell you is I'm super passionate about it because I've been with Rock Tape for a while, and I'm one of the lead educators for them, and I have my own education company, so I teach taping courses all over Canada and the U.S. So I'm a big proponent, and I'm not a big proponent because I have a vested interest financially. I do. I get paid, obviously, to do this, but I'm passionate about it because it works. And I think it's a missing link for a lot of people. It's the easiest and the simplest non-invasive strategy to affect changes in motor control.
And that's what I love about it. It's non-invasive.
It's
It
not.
works.
It
I mean,
works.
I tried it and it feels fine. And the cool thing about it too, that tape lasts for a while. Like it doesn't fall off in a day. It lasts for what, a good week, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
why.
so I'll mention one other thing, and we've talked about the movement issue, and I think it's important to view taping through a lens of movement, because that's really the goal. We've talked a little bit about pain, and I think again the pain messaging is one that we can alter. We can alter that pain gate with tape, and so it's really, really essential. But the one thing I think that's proprietary about Rock Tape, and I've worked with tons of tapes, and I taught for other companies, and you guys know I work for Charles, and I taught for Charles and stuff. But the tape piece for me has been very powerful with Rock Tape because they designed the tape for one reason, to stay on. And the last thing I'll tell you is when someone says that the person put tape on me and it fell off within the first hour, cheaper tapes, what do you think's happening? Why use it? My
Right.
goal when I apply tape to a patient is to make sure that they have some pain management, if that's what we're dealing with regards to taping. More importantly, we're going to really prime them to do what we need them to do. So if they leave my office and they feel comfortable, and the tape reduces their pain and provides their nervous system with a bit more information, you, you've got to believe they're going to be a little more adherent to all the exercise stuff we give them. If someone leaves and they're in pain and they feel uncomfortable about movement, do you think they're going to do corrective exercise? Why would they?
Right. Yeah.
The brain's primed not to do that anyway. Like, you're literally trying to do something the brain isn't supposed to be doing anyway.
Right.
So we're changing the format by which this nervous system operates, and we're giving the person I look at taping as this, a window of opportunity for more efficient movement. That's where tape fits for me.
Efficient movement. I love that. And I think people need that in their life. Efficient movement.
Absolutely. So why don't we do this? Why don't I tape? My brother-in-law's here, and I'll show you two taping protocols. We'll do a low back first. I'm going to do two taping protocols, and the low back one, I'm going to tell you, from my perspective, home run. If you have anyone with back pain, this is the one. I've been taping a lot of police officers, so I work with a lot of frontline responders and law enforcement, and a lot of the police officers present with back pain, headaches, and foot pain. Surprise, surprise, they wear a vest. So they're in a flex position all day. They take the performance back chain, a very clear fascial chain in the back, is loaded and tensile. There's a tension in that system. We take tape and change the tensional arrangement. I have guys tell me I'll put tape in their lower back, and they'll tell me my headaches, my foot pain, my low back pain, gone. Fast, man. Works that fast.
And oh my gosh, that's
So we're doing a study here in Canada. We're gonna build this, and this is one of the things I want to do because we're Rock Tapes, we're really going to focus on our education. We're going to build tape into law enforcement protocols. So we're doing tests with some of the forces locally. I'm in Lindsay. We're going to do some testing with the officers, and we're going to start teaching them how to tape each other, or their family tape them, and see if it affects their job outcomes. See if it affects their pain management strategy or their pain outcomes. And you'll be surprised at how effective it is. It could change a lot of them. It could change their pain ratings and their comfort doing what they do.
I'm sure that's going to be a great. I know it's going to be a great study, and I know it's going to be a successful study because I mean,
I
if
think
they work
so.
in jail, why wouldn't it not work on a cop, right? Especially with
Absolutely. I
example.
have tons of cops, and you know what? They're all buddies of mine, but they'll come in and they're the same guys that are like, yeah, the tape thing, you're just the tape guy. And they'll tape them, and they'll get back to me like, okay, I'm gonna give you that one, man.
Yeah.
That was I'm gonna say that I have to agree with you with regards to the tape. So that's probably 5 or 6 times a week I have patients come back to me and say, okay, I'm gonna give you the tape thing. It's made a difference.
I know I have to tell all my work buddies at work because we're working with patients moving around, and they're all saying their lower back hurts. I'm like, have you tried tape? Have you tried tape? This is
So Matt, I'm gonna show you an H application for taping, and I'm gonna show you a really simple application. Let me walk you through this, and I'm gonna explain to you. I'm gonna walk you through the menu. It's very, very simple. And what we'll do at the end of this tonight, I'm gonna send you guys a link that you can provide to your viewers or people listening to the podcast. so they can access. I'm going to send you a video of how to tape the lower back and how to tape the shoulder directly from our Rock Tape library.
Awesome. I'm excited
So
to share.
that way everyone can, they have a guide. And just to finish before we do the taping, again, you don't have to be a clinician or a therapist to tape anybody. There's no restriction on scope of practice with taping. That people have told me that's not true. I mean, I've never heard of that. But even more importantly, under the assumption that you're not going to tape in an open wound or someone that's expressed some sensitivity, you can't screw this up. You're not going to do damage. And so it's really important for people to have a comfort with this. You can apply tape along a line of tissue that's tight. One piece of tape. They've done the study. And the reality is it has an effect. So the last thing I'm going to say is this. Two variables that are important. The direction of the tape, whether it's top down or bottom up, is irrelevant. You don't have to tape origin to insertion. That is not true. That is a myth. And the reason that is a myth is because when people screwed it up and didn't hit origin to insertion, and I would even argue, tell me you hit it. How do you even know where it is? Find it. I know where it is in an anatomical diagram, but I'm a therapist. Putting your hands on something and nailing the origin and insertion sometimes isn't easy with a piece of tape. Fact is, they put tape on, they didn't do it properly, and it still had an effect. You had a problem with your model. It's a sensory model. You're tapping into a pool of mechanoreceptors and tissue that's highly adaptive. That's how tape works. Make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So let's shift gears. I'm going to shift my camera. I'm going to bring the camera back in here, and I'm going to tape low back first, and I'll explain how we do this, and I want to walk you through this as kind of a menu, so it's very, very straightforward.
Okay.
So let's just do this, and I will change.
I can't take the suspense anymore, guys. I have to see this. I'm letting you two nerds about this talk. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for the actual demonstration.
Nate, does it sound nerdy?
No, it's just you guys are nerds about it because you guys know all the technical stuff. I'm just a guy in pain wanting to see it work. So
I was just in Calgary and I got on a soapbox about fascia. I was teaching with 3 other guys, amazing guys. We did these brainstorm sessions. And at one point I looked at the audience and I was like, that was the nerdiest 5 minutes that probably has ever occurred at this conference. What in the hell was I doing? But I'm very passionate about it, and I'll explain to you what's going on.
I love
so let's do this. We're going to do low back first.
I can't wait.
So I'm going to have you right here. Actually, Dunk, if you can sit on that side. So my brother-in-law is going to expose his back, and what we're going to do, and I just want to make sure, guys, yeah, we can see this perfectly. That's awesome. I teach out of here all the time, so I've kind of become very well schooled with regards to this visual medium and having a camera in my office. So there's a lot of things I can do to assess this. I can start and we look at tone, texture, temperature of tissue. Now he's someone that I do treat, and so sometimes I'll treat his neck and the upper back. But the fact is, the spinal chain is very much connected, and a lot of times I'll tape lower back. So I can do some screens with him. I could have him move through flexion and extension, and just have him move through those ranges of motion. And as he moves through those ranges of motion, my questions are simple. Do you find this stiff? And would you describe the response you're having as painful? Pain and stiffness are not the same thing. But in the context of where we are right now, let's assume that he has some pain in the lower back. I'm going to assess him by doing the things again. I'm going to do, and one of the most important things with low back function when we assess is rotation. So Dunk, I just want to put your arms like that, and I want you to rotate in that direction. So we're going to check his range of motion. Rotation is a very important parameter to assess. Not only rotational range of motion, even more importantly, I'm going to come here and I'm going to press and you're going to try to stop. Ready? So his rotational stability is relatively good, but it's a little weaker there. So we're going to tape him and then we're going to rescreen it. One of the most important things you can do is have someone move, tape them, and have them move again. Screen, rescreen models are important because it's really important for the nervous system to get a sense of what's going on and for the patient to get a sense of what's going on. So here's how we avoid some of the risks of taping. And one of the primary risks of taping is skin sensitivity. So if you're going to tape someone, there's a single question you need to ask them. Have they ever had a response to tape or by extension, a Band-Aid? I have a very small number of people, a very limited percentage of my patients who've had a reaction to tape. And there are very unique individuals that we can't tape. But I'm going to tell you, it's relatively small. When someone tells me they've had a reaction to tape, it's almost invariably someone's overstretched the tape. So I'm going to show you a way to fix that. First of all, rock tape is a relatively dense tape and the adhesive is amazingly effective. So we want this tape to stay on for 4 to 5 days. The reason, if he presents to me with back pain in my office, and I've done acupuncture and all my therapies, ART, whatever, when he leaves my office, he's got homework. And if I use tape, all the tape is going to do over the next 5 days is reinforce the effects of what I've done from a treatment perspective. His tissues are going to move more efficiently. There's going to be less congestion in the tissue, and his brain's going to have a better messaging pattern. I'm going to provide some better information to the brain. By extension, he's going to move more efficiently. He's going to be willing to move when I give him the exercise. So that's the goal with this. So what I'm going to do is, instead of me stretching the tape, and the biggest mistake with tape applications, quite literally, is overstretching the tape. A complete waste of time, because people believe if a little bit of stretch is good, more stretch is better. Not true. We work from a model that we describe as less is more. And I'll tell you how I describe it. No one's ever fixed a Ferrari with a sledgehammer. You don't have to beat the crap out of the system to drive change. A very small hinge can open a very big door. And that's that window of opportunity with tape application that primes movement. So what I'm going to do is, instead of me stretching the tape, I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to have my patient stretch. I'm going to take the tape. Does it make sense?
Yes, yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tape, and when I take the lower back, I'm going to tape along the paraspinal axis. So I'm going to come bottom up. And I'm going to cut 2 pieces of tape the same length, and I'm going to follow that paraspinal axis. This is called a regional or a pain management strategy when I tape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to follow a fascial line. I'm going to follow this paraspinal line. Let's say that he has pain right there. It'll make sense in a second, because X, or pain, marks the spot for the last strip. So I'm going to take 2 strips, and these are described as stabilization or longitudinal strips. They trace the fascial system. Performance back chain starts at the foot and goes right to the head. So if it's tight, it could be tight anywhere. I'm going to change the load right here, and I'll just mention one thing. This area, the thoracolumbar fascia, is the conduit for the upper and lower body. This is where things go sideways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tape. And when I take the tape, I'm going to take it and I'm going to round the corners. The reason I want the tape to stay on, this way it's not going to catch on bedding or clothing. And once the tape peels off the skin, it's done. So I want to make sure that it's durable. Tape needs to stay on. So I put Duncan in a forward leaning position, stretch the tissues. I'm going to break this and very lightly touch the tape. You don't want to put your fingers on the tape. And in that stretch position, I'm simply going to go paper off tension and follow the paraspinal axis. Number 1.
Can you tell the listeners about the paraspinal,
Yep. Paraspinals is just, here's my spine. Paraspinals are on each side. So you've got a track of tissue that follow the erector spinae all the way up to the neck. But if I unload it here, Duncan again has a history of cervical tightness and headaches. This will have an effect, because nothing's regional in this body. Everything's connected.
Mhm.
So I'm going to take a second piece of tape, and I'm going to follow, and again, I'm going to mirror it on the other side of the spine. And follow up. So now I've got 2 pieces of tape unloading there. Now I'm going to take a piece of tape, and I'm going to come right across, and I'm going to decompress right over the area that's dense. So let's assume that the area that's most densified or rigid or fixed is right here, and this is where it is. Most times with back pain, when you mobilize this thoracolumbar fascia, you'll get a resistance to glide. And again, in most people, you'll see it. So I'm going to round it just like I did for the other strips. And I'm going to apply what we described in our model as a decompression strip. I'm going to take a piece of tape. I'm going to come here. I'm going to break the tape in the middle. You apply it to the area right here. I'm going to anchor it in the middle, and I'm going to pull out here and wash onto the oblique axis. And I'm going to come this way, and I'm going to come on. So off the back, and I'm going to bring the tape around the edges. So I come onto the lateral wall, the abdominal wall. And then Doug's going to sit up, and you'll see the tape's all wrinkled. Wrinkles are good. When I take the tape or I wrinkle skin, I do this all the time with my hands. So I'm a massage therapist. we wrinkle skin. By wrinkling skin and changing that, by rolling skin and shearing it, we change the structures of the underlying characteristics of the tissue, but I'm also changing, again, by virtue of the conduit from here to the brain, I'm changing the messaging. As a result of me taping his lower back, he's probably going to have a little less pain, which is to be expected, hopefully. But even more importantly, he's going to have a sense of control and ease of movement that's going to really reinforce his ability to do the things I need him to do to get stronger. So I will say this, the last, and I get this question all the time, can tape be used in someone who doesn't have an injury as acute, as it applied, as an improved force? I'm not sure, but I can tell you that I use it with athletes all the time, and I think it improves how they time out contraction. I think it improves how the body responds to load and how the body coordinates function. Now, do I have research to suggest that? No, but I've done this enough for the last 15 years to know that I think there are changes from a performance perspective when you apply tape to the skin, because again, it's all about a brain-based response. So any questions, Matt, with regards to the back stuff? This is one of the standard ones. This is called an H application.
So just to kind of reword things, not rewords, but so you had them stretch, and then
Absolutely. Yeah, here, we'll do it again. It's easy, man. So I'm going to bring Duncan into a position of stretch. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut two pieces of tape that really form a fascial line. There's a spine. I'm going to mirror it on each side. So I change the load of these tissues, and then where the pain is in that stretch position, I'm going to decompress, put a bit of stretch in this tissue, and it's going to snap back and decompress the area that's dense. If I decompress it, it's going to slide better. You're going to have less pain as a result and a better input to the nervous system. Look, better sensory in invariably means better motor out. It's a dynamic adaptive loop. It's a very simple way to change things.
No, that's perfect. Yeah.
Make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to show you one more, and I'll show you a shoulder application. Shoulder applications, again, I had someone today with an impingement. They just had actually a supraspinatus repair. The cuff's been repaired. The labral floor is inflamed. I put the tape on, and she literally texted me this afternoon and said, when I got home, I could put my hand from here overhead. I haven't been able to do that. Well, her thing was I could put my hair up. She had her arm over her head, and she was left my office today pretty emotional. And she said, this is the first time I've had even a hint of relief where I've been able to do just normal daily activity. And that's why I said this from the beginning. As much as I want to tell you this is a performance-based application, I'm not sure that's true. Everyone's an athlete, man. Everyone has the fundamental expectation of movement. The fact that I have, professional rugby players home that I treat, and at the same time I have a mother-in-law who's 89 who I tape all the time. She wants to golf. Her expectations for movement are no different. It's just she's not going to be playing rugby, but their expectations for movement are the same. So that's why it's so important to start to frame taping as an application that primes function and movement. You don't have to be a high performance athlete to benefit from tape application.
Man, yeah, no, I agree. I mean,
Make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let me do a shoulder, and then I can let my brother-in-law go home. He's worked all day. He's doing this as a favor to me. And then what we'll do is you guys can ask me any other questions you want to, and we can wrap it up. But this is a great opportunity for you guys to see some taping in real time and understand just some basics around tape application.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great opportunity for our listeners, and if they're listening or watching, watching, you're gonna get the gist of it, but this is
it's very visual and very tactile. So that's just the nature of the beast with this stuff. Okay, I'm gonna have my brother-in-law go. You're gonna swing your legs around that way. Don't gonna tape this shoulder. Yep, just swing your legs there. That way. Something like that. You got it. It's perfect. So let's say that Duncan has some shoulder pain. Shows up to my office with shoulder pain. So I'm just gonna bring through shoulder pain right now, but this is a little sticky when I move him. When I bring him into an internal external rotation, I'm just gonna bring your arm down here. I'm gonna bring him into external rotation. I got a barrier here. And let me just move the camera up slightly, just a little bit. Perfect. So when I bring him into external rotation, I've got a bit of a barrier. And again, all I want to do is change this. So we'll tape him, and you'll see in a second. This will make a difference. So there's a bit of a barrier here. I'm going to bring him through abduction and flexion, just to see if there's any change in range of motion. It's not painful at all, but he's got a bit of crepitus in the joint. So we'll see if we can centrate the joint and improve this range of motion. So again, let's work through the basic expectations. There's no contraindication here. There's no open wound. He does not have a history of tape sensitivity with regards to tape application. So all I'm going to do is tape or frame the shoulder girdle. And it will, by extension, not only change how these tissues load and how the tissues function from a load tension standpoint around the joint, but it's also going to give the brain some information about movement and smooth out or ease the movement strategy. And that's really where we are. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take him. So if you're not watching, I'll just try to explain it as best I can. So what I've done is I've taken his arm and I've taken his hand and put it in his front pocket. So I've stretched the back of the shoulder. Again, remember, I'm stretching the patient, not the tape, and in an effort to avoid any skin sensitivity or shear. When someone calls me and says, I put tape on and it blistered the skin and they reacted to it, invariably I ask them, how much did you stretch the tape? Because almost, I'm going to probably say 8 out of 10 times, it's a practitioner problem, not a patient problem. So what I'm going to do is I've got the back of the shoulder now stretched with his hand in his front pocket, and I'm just going to take a piece of tape and frame the shoulder. I'm going to create this is called a basket application. And all I do with the tape is I frame the shoulder. I trim the edges of the tape because I want to make sure that the tape stays on through thick and thin. Again, I can start at the top and come up, or top and go down. Direction of tape does not matter. Contrary to what some people are going to tell you, that's not true. And I just literally use the tape to frame the shoulder. Now, I'm going to put a piece of tape in the front, which means I have to take his arm and put it slightly behind him to stretch the front of the shoulder. And again, I'm going to follow the same line. I'm going to basket the front edge of the shoulder. So it looks, again, like I'm literally basketing the humeral head.
Okay.
And we'll frame the shoulder, and then I'll put one decompression strip, and we'll reassess his range of motion, and I can almost guarantee you it will be improved. So I assign the tape just below the deltoid tuberosity, and I come around and frame the front side of the shoulder. So now I have a basket on the shoulder. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a piece of tape, and I'm going to come over top. All I'm going to do with a piece of tape over top is I'm going to create a decompression strip and a fascial glide that creates a drag in the fascia in this direction. And you'll see this will have an effect almost immediately. Last one. Okay, turn your hand. So his hand's in a neutral position. I've got his hand externally rotated in a neutral position. I'm going to come off the front side of the shoulder. And all I do is pull the tape in a way that decompresses that area as I pull through and bring it over the top of the shoulder onto the shoulder blade at the back edge. And now I've basketed the shoulder with tape. So front to back, and I framed it. And it's a simple strategy. I'm going to bring him into this position, bring your shoulder up. And you'll see in a second, I've given some input to the shoulder. Any pain at all?
No.
Almost immediate change. Now, it doesn't always work like that, but he doesn't have any existing shoulder issues. It's a little difficult, but even now I'm going to move him through abduction. How's that feel?
Right.
It feel like he can feel it. I can feel the range of motions almost. There's an ease to the movement, but look at his external rotation, one shot with tape. Less resistance. The tape is just giving his body a little confidence in movement. And if someone uses the word it's easier or smoother to move, those are all great ways to describe movement. So 2 really simple strategies for tape application, one lower back and one shoulder. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Awesome. You're good to go. All right. Okay, let me switch cameras and we can ask me any questions you need to ask me about taping and we're good to go.
Okay. So I know, is there, okay, my first question is
Sure.
there too much, I know we did the shoulder and the back. Is there too many
Did you
tapes?
use too much tape?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And I'll give you 2 examples.
In different spots.
So here's what we know. I was just in Calgary with a guy, Troy Levine. He's a pain science guru. And he was telling me about a study where they took people and they had 3 pain markers, 2 or 3 pain markers. When they came to the office, they said to them in the research study, don't discuss any of the other 2, only discuss 1 pain marker. Let them focus on one area. And the reality is, when they did, the other 2 areas that they had pain in reduced almost immediately. Pain is perception. Pain is a predictive measure by the brain to determine what's going on. And if all you do is focus on pain, and that's the only message you deal with all day, you're going to have pain. Surprise, surprise. You're feeding the animal. So to answer your question, I'm going to look at the most provocative center in the body. With my brother-in-law, he has cervical issues. So I generally tape along the cervical spine. It has effects in other areas, but there is a situation where too much of a good thing. But I'll give you the perfect example. So I teach on Sunday, and what we do is in the morning, we tape from the ground up. So I do 7 sites. I do ankle, knee, hip. I walk them through and I teach them how to tape everything. But at lunch, I have them take the tape off. And the reason is we have a situation, I call it being tape drunk. I've had people at lunch leave the tape on from bottom up, all the sites, and they're nauseous when they get back from lunch and lightheaded.
Are they restricting?
Too much of a good thing, man. You got tape everywhere. The nervous system is on fire. You put tape on every part of the body. You would never do that, Matt.
Yeah.
You would never tape so you got to be strategic. It's like any therapy, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing fascial stretch or acupuncture or whatever. I've got to be strategic about what I do. I can't just hit everything because it's almost confusing for the nervous system, to be honest.
Yeah. So my next question was, can you over fry that nervous system?
Mm-hmm.
Which you kind of went into.
You could use tape. If you put tape on 5 different areas of the body and the person left, it might be too much. And it does happen. In fact, I'll tell you another one very quickly, a caveat. I got tons of guys with concussions and we'll tape them. And I've had guys faint after I tape them.
Wow.
Too much information to a platform along the cervical axis or the cervical canister. When I tape it, it's literally too much information for a nervous system that's really, really threatened by application or touch. So the idea of tape on the neck can be a problem. I've had in the last few months, I've had a couple hockey players faint when I taped them or got nauseous.
So it's mainly, right, like you're kind of tricking the brain a little bit to reactivate certain areas that, hasn't been touched in a while. And that's why the sudden increase of blood flow, the sudden increase of that stimuli to those areas is causing the faint.
It could be. The fact, Nate, the problem with those guys is because they've had a concussion, the cervical canister is highly, highly sensitive.
Sure.
Hypersensitive. Even massage, like when I do work, I worked on a guy today, I've got to be really cautious about how I go into those tissues and how I drag through those tissues and work through, scalenes and all of the cervical canister, because the fact is it's super sensitive. And it again, let me just say it this way. It's supposed to be. There's trauma. Right.
We tell
so tape, there is a situation where it could be too much of a good thing. Fact. But in general, if you're strategic about it, you use tape with a bit of intuition and logic, like any strategy or a coach. It's safe as hell. You're not going to do anything that's really going to disrupt anything, other than, I think, provide the nervous system with a little more clarity and information.
I love it.
Where can they find Rock Tape at?
So there's a number of places, but the easiest thing is go to rocktape.com. And if you're a therapist or someone in the performance world, you can apply, and generally it's relatively straightforward. I don't deal in the US retail side, but I deal in the larger retail sector because I work for Rock Tape. You can sign up for a medical account. And when you have a medical account, you get some pretty deep discounts on tape. And I'll tell you that people will search and find cheaper tapes online and all of these other tapes. And I'll tell you, you get what you pay for in this marketplace. Cheap tape is exactly what you would expect. Cheap tape. It doesn't stay on. And if we agree that what we've talked about is the effect over time of tape application on priming the nervous system and improving movement efficiency and treatment outcomes after the fact, if the tape falls off in the first 30 minutes, I'm not sure exactly what you think's going on, because it doesn't do anything.
In comparison to yours that will last, almost a week is what you said.
Yeah, you know what, man, we are, 4 to 5 days. And the guy that originally built, the owner of Rock Tape, when he built the company, it was a really simple strategy. I think the story was that he went out for a bike ride. He used tape. It felt great, and it fell off. And he went back to one of his business partners or some of the people he worked with and said, if we can really design a tape that has some longevity that will stay on and stick over time, we could make a difference. And quite honestly, he did. It was brilliant marketing and brilliant idea.
So what do you tell the people who are super sweaty?
Okay, so I can tell you this. I've only had 2 guys in my career that I haven't been able to tape. And let me just give you this. Rock Tape has 3 levels of tape. We have a level 1 for skin sensitivity. So geriatric patients, I tape pregnant women. I do pregnancy taping on women. The skin is highly susceptible to shear, and in geriatric patients, the collagen has changed. The skin's a little different. So we use a level 1. Level 2 is our standard. I use it in probably 75% of my clients. But I have guys who are sweaters, hockey players, and athletes that sweat a ton. We have a level 3, which is H2O. If it doesn't stick, it ain't sticking, because H2O sticks like crazy. I've had 2 guys that I couldn't tape, and they were both NHL players. And one guy was so bad from a sweating standpoint. I remember him telling me they had to IV him between the second and third periods.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, man. Crazy. I've never seen anyone sweat like that. So he and another guy that I had, who both great hockey players, we couldn't keep tape on them.
So it's very limited.
That is a very rare moment, Matt. That does not happen often. Most people, even if they sweat, H2O tape or level 3 tape is a very viable option, and you will make a huge difference by virtue of that.
That's awesome.
Cool.
I guess one of my last questions would be,
Sure.
say that, how would we, I guess maybe we could talk either off you too, but how can we implement rock tape into like hospitals? What do you think is the barrier?
There's not a barrier. It's just that it hasn't been a marketplace that we worked with. But I have a ton of patients who are nurses, and my daughter's a nurse. My son was a nurse. He's in a different profession, but they are very aware of that. I will tell you that that's one of my initiatives in the next couple of years. Is we're going to build back. There was a change in post-COVID. This was not a company thing. It was just post-COVID. The education's changed. But we're really going to start to build some awareness in the medical field, because I think people, again, assume it's a performance-based application. Not true.
Right.
So I've got nurses that have said to me, quite literally, I've treated them. I had a girl with a concussion. She was in a car accident. She left the other day, and I had treated her, and she's like, oh my God, my neck feels amazing. And I taped her. And she did reach out to me and said, where could this fit for us? And I said, literally anywhere you want.
Right.
Surgically, it's crazy, man. Scar taping, I teach scar taping. I'll teach it on Sunday. Scar taping is game changing, man. You tape right over an established scar and shear the scar with tape. And as they move, the tape unloads and changes the mobility of the scar.
Yeah.
Again, I have guys with knee replacements who are weeks ahead of schedule simply because we treated a scar.
Yeah. We have a rehabilitation center on our campus where I work. And I'm just thinking like, man, this would be the ideal patient.
No doubt about it.
A week off, so they don't have that open wound, right? They're in that movement mobility stage. This would be perfect for them,
And it's crazy that they're not using it though, man. That's the part of it for me. And you had asked me that, how do more people know about this? And I ask that question every day, because every time I use it, I was just in Calgary. There were 300 people at this conference, packed. And by the end of it, I literally got 100 emails the Monday after the conference saying, where do I get this? Why didn't I know about this? How am I not using this as a therapist? So that's my job with Rock Tape, with my company, is to build that awareness. And once, as you guys are seeing, once you build that awareness, it's a pretty easy thing to grasp. Like, you can wrap your head around the science. And once you understand how it works and why it works, it's a pretty easy application to apply.
Yeah. I think I'm going to try to make a email and send it to my CEO and just like, hey, I have a great idea. Why not? Why not give
Absolutely.
it a try?
And as I said, my job is, and again, if any of your listeners are interested, I mean, my email is simple. It's themovementmojo@gmail.com. I spend all day, any day, answering questions about tape application. That's my job with Rock Tape. And that's really the fundamental premise around what my company does. It's a movement-based company, but Rock Tape is a huge part of it. So your listeners, anyone that's following us, can go to rocktape.com. They can check it out. And if they have any questions about anything to do with Rock Tape, don't hesitate. Send me an email. Just tell me that you listen to the podcast. and I'll be happy to answer your questions about rock tape. And then lastly, what I'll do is I'll send both of you a link to 2 videos on shoulder and back applications so your listeners can see it in real time. Our videos are very clear instructions, and they're simple to follow.
I've seen the videos. They're very simple. They're very, like I said, straight to the point
Yeah,
and well edited.
absolutely.
So
Awesome.
well, Brad, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I
Hey,
appreciate
man,
your client, aka brother-in-law.
yeah, I called him today. My wife unfortunately had to race out, but he was more than happy to do it. He's a big tape advocate. I've taped him for years. So he was like, no problem. He's going home to bed. I think he worked all day, but yeah, guys, I'm more than happy to do this anytime. I really enjoy this, and I think you guys are doing a great job. So I'm more than happy to support this. And if there's anything you need from me, and your listeners, don't hesitate, reach out, and I'd be more than happy to answer any and every question about tape application.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, man. We really appreciate you coming on, giving us some of your time, your expertise, showing the benefits of this because I think there's a lot of people living in pain, right? And like for them to have a remedy of some sort is fantastic. So can't stress it enough, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us again.
My pleasure, guys. It's a real pleasure to do this, and I love this stuff. I mean, it's my passion, so I love sitting and talking about this. I could do this all day.
That's right, brother. Well, guys, I'll tell you what, this is the end of the episode. Brad, once again, thank you so much for coming on. Matt, thank you again for kind of leading the charge on this one. I know this is kind of your world, so I really appreciate you kind of answering these questions. You actually asked a bunch of questions that I had, so it was kind of you were reading my mind a little bit.
Perfect.
Yeah, guys. So thank you so much for coming on, guys. If you've made it this far, check out Brad and all his social medias as well. We'll have all the links there. If you're having some form of pain and you watch this video, obviously check out all the other things that are out there as well. But rock tape is definitely going to be a fantastic option for you to at least entertain to see if it works well for you. If not, so be it. But it doesn't hurt to give it a try. So
Absolutely. Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Thank you so much for coming on. And to all the listeners out there, if you don't do anything else, just try to be a little better. Thanks again.